Hey Book Dragons, welcome back to my channel. I've got a book review for you today. Let's go! Thank you to my patrons. I really appreciate all you do to support the channel. So I recently finished reading Peace Turmoil by Elliot Brooks. This is the first book in an epic fantasy series known as the Dark Shores Saga, and I really enjoyed this book, guys. If you're not familiar with Elliot Brooks, she also is a booktuber, a very successful booktuber, I might add. If you enjoy the video, please like the video. It helps bump my video up in the algorithms. And if you enjoy my content and you're not subscribed, why not? I'd love to have you as a subscriber. So go ahead and do that as well. And if you've been following me for a long time and you want to support what I do, you can also hit me up on my Patreon and join there as well. With all that being said, let's get right to the review. As I mentioned, Peace Turmoil is an epic fantasy novel, first book in a series, and I really enjoyed this book, guys. So many things appealed to me about this book, and I'll let you know about that when I get to the prose. But first, I'll give you a spoiler-free summary of the book. We'll talk about the magic and the characters, and then we'll get to the pros and cons, okay? So this book is set in the world of Abraham, and this world is divided up into 4 different kingdoms that coexist together amidst an uneasy political and social climate. You have the kingdom of Mysidia, ruled over by King Pierre, and Mysidia is beset by political unrest. You've got the kingdom of Zenith, which is a city of scholars ruled over by a peaceful liberator named Gerard. We also have the kingdom of Sadie, which is a free, neutral kingdom that is facing a brewing insurgence. And there is also the mysterious kingdom of Eve across the sea that is home to multiple seers and people who have long lifespans, if not eternal lifespans. Their magic can heal them and things like that. So these are the 4 main kingdoms that are found in the world of Abraham. And amidst all the political and social maneuvering, trying to bring the kingdoms together, everything is thrown into chaos when an army of fiends begin to attack the main city of Zenith. And so that's the crux that this story is founded on. So now let's talk about the characters. To start off with, we have Gerard, the king of Zenith. He is known as the King of Peace because he was a liberator during the War of Fire and brought peace in the realm of Abraham. And he was a former resident of Mysidia, and he married the princess of Zenith, and upon her death he became the sole ruler. His daughter Genevieve, the princess of Zenith, is the keeper of a mystical artifact known as the Amulet of Eve, which comes from the land of Eve, and we'll bring that up later. And she is set to become a political chess piece to be married off to a worthy suitor, to forge alliances, and to strengthen the kingdom of Zenith. We also have the kingdom of Mysidia, ruled over by King Pierre. His son Roland is the keeper of the dagger of Eve. And the dagger and the amulet are mystically connected together so that he and Guinevere can communicate back and forth to each other on occasion, and they've become quite close as a result. There is also Dorian, who was adopted at birth from a neighboring foreign country, but he holds very high status in the kingdom of Mysidia as if he were a legitimately born son, with the exception of being able to rule. There's also the kingdom of Sadie, ruled over by Harold Rorickson, whose wife is currently sick abed and is not expected to live very long. He also has his sons Abaddon, who is a chemist and scientist, constantly creating new potions and healing elixirs, things of that nature. And his other son, Dietrich, who also goes under an assumed name and is known as the Assassin Prince of Sadie. And one of the things that comes into play is to bring healing to their mother and hopefully save her life. They are on a personal quest to somehow take hold of the Dagger of Eve for themselves because it has healing properties. And then there is the Kingdom of Eve. One of the major figures of Eve is King Alkane, and his daughter Zodia, or at least I think that's how her name is pronounced, is a very powerful seer, and she has been dispatched to the other kingdoms of Abraham to foster alliances, and also as a bit of a spy to see what's going on in the kingdoms and offer her services. There is also Zorn, the Dragon Master. Yes, this book has dragons, plenty of them, and I really enjoyed the dragons in this story. Sira is one of those dragons. And Zorn is not only the master of dragons, but he has a very unique ability to communicate with fiends of all kinds, of which dragons are also considered by many to be fiends in this story. And we'll talk a little bit more about fiends when we get to the magic system. I want to kind of save them for that. So let's move on to the magic so we can talk about that. The magic system is very reminiscent of JRPGs or Japanese RPGs such as Final Fantasy, and I really love that about it, and I don't very often see that incorporated into a story, at least not as well as it is incorporated into this story. The main magic of this world are known as the auroras, and there are different colored auroras based on the different types of magic that they can perform, such as fire, water, mostly to do with elemental magics. But there are certain auroras that you can master that will allow you to call weapons. And there is a distinction between regular weapons, which are known as touched weapons, and touching is a form of magic as well, but not nearly as intricate. If you use the auroras to call a weapon, you get a very unique weapon that materializes out of thin air and has strong magical abilities, strong killing abilities, whereas touched weapons, the auroras are used to touch the weapon in such a way that it becomes enhanced, but it's not necessarily a magical weapon. Both types of weapons are used depending on the needs of the moment and depending on how much energy the user has available to them. If they're extremely exhausted or they've called on the auroras as much as they possibly can in a given moment, they won't be able to call a weapon, and so they have to rely on any touched weapons they have. So I like that about it, that there are definite limitations to the using of the auroras. And then there are certain characters in the story that are able to control fiends. Now fiends are creatures, some monstrous, some that would seem regular, like snakes and badger type creatures and things like that. But most of the fiends have magical abilities. They can use the auroras for their own purposes, albeit in a more feral and animalistic way, but they can use those to their advantage, and they can also nullify magic to a certain degree that is used by the residents of Abraham. So very often if you come up against a fiend, you're better off using your touched weapon, and in some cases any called weapons, because the pure use of the auroras will likely be thwarted by the fiends that you come up against. There's one battle in particular where there's a very old dragon-type creature that floats effortlessly in the sky, and they have to be able to fight off this dragon fiend, and it was quite remarkable. I loved the way it was done. And one thing I loved about this story is there are small interludes with pictures of fiends. This is an illustrated edition, so you have pictures of the fiends along with a brief description of what they are like and what should or should not be used against them. And that always comes prior to a chapter that is going to feature that fiend. So I thought that was really, really good. There are also other little interludes that give hints as to what's going on in the political climate, letters back and forth between different characters. So it was really a good way to immerse you in the story. And so I'm kind of getting into prose here. So let's just talk about the prose. I thought the strongest features of this book were the character work and the political intrigue and machinations. The characters in this book are so good. You do have a lot of different characters, but I already mentioned the main POV characters. Most of the chapters feature one of those names as the chapter title. There's a lot of different characters, but the number of POV characters was a small cast. Elliot does a really good job of giving you a window into the character motivations, the things that they fear, the things that they struggle with, the greed that many of them possess, and so on and so forth. Really, really well done. Each character was very distinct, at least for the POV characters. I do definitely want to learn more about some of the side characters, and maybe that will come in future books, because this is going to be an ongoing saga from what I understand. I believe she's writing book 2 as we speak. So the political intrigue and machinations, as I mentioned, is phenomenal. I loved the interplay of politics between the neighboring kingdoms and seeing how they work together, but also seeing how they struggle to work together with various different aspects of what's important to each kingdom. There are things that definitely create a dividing wall between them. And so I absolutely love that. There's a lot of mystery, especially surrounding the kingdom of Eve across the sea. So I'm looking forward to seeing more about that in future books. And so, yeah, highly recommend this, if for nothing else than the political maneuverings and the character work. Now, if I did have one con that I want to talk about, and to be honest, I didn't find really many cons in this book. This is a self-published book. I would put this right up there with traditionally published books in terms of production quality and story quality. The immersion in the world, it was just so fascinating. Yeah, so right up there with many traditionally published fantasy novels. My one con is that the first 40% of the book goes very slow. And I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, but it may turn people away up front if they want a more fast-paced story. So I want you to read this book, but I want you to read it with the knowledge that that first 40% is going to be slow. And that's very intentional. Elliot takes time to build her world, and I think that's a very good thing. Could it have been a little more fast-paced? Sure. But is it absolutely necessary? No. Because I think your first book in a series, it's absolutely necessary to build that world. And you think of books like the Stormlight Archive series from Brandon Sanderson, The Way of Kings. Oh man, this book goes faster than The Way of Kings in terms of build-up, because The Way of Kings was super slow for me. I mean, really. So I think the pacing at the beginning of this book, even though it's slower, it has a leg up on Sanderson's Way of Kings book. So it's a slight con, but don't let it deter you from reading the book. Just know that it pays off in spades. Once you get past that first 40%, or maybe if it's even 35%, things really start to ramp up fast. And I mean fast. And I highly recommend that you read Peace and Turmoil. It is a fantastic debut novel from a fantastic and fun person. You all know, if you watched Elliot's YouTube channel, that she's phenomenal, and her book is no different. The illustrations are fantastic. It was illustrated by Jay from Captured in Words, and he also has a YouTube channel. You may have run across it. He's phenomenal as well, and his artwork in this is brilliant. So highly, highly recommend that you read this book. And I'm going to stop gushing now so that you can go buy it. And let me know in the comments, are you going to read this book? Have you heard of it? Is it something brand new, something you've never heard about? I really hope you'll check it out. Let me know in the comments below. I will pin a spoiler comment in the comments below so that you can talk spoilers if you have any for this book. I hope you read more books, including Peace and Turmoil, and have a wonderful day.